Good morning, Anne.
Good morning, James.
And good morning, everybody. Well, first and foremost, I'd like to say thank you for tuning in. Thank you to anybody and everybody that has listened to our podcast before. All of the feedback, questions, suggestions, thank you. It's been really helpful and genuinely encouraging. So thank you very, very much. So for the next half an hour or so, unplanned, an organic conversation between Anne and myself, and we'll just see where it goes and we'll take it from there. We really are beginners. We are sat around a table with a microphone between us, very little experience in trying to put together anything like this in this format. So any technical difficulties, bloopers, or anything that we've not planned to happen, as long as we can do the best that we can do, bear with us. And thank you for your patience and understanding. Okay, I think that's the awkward introduction out of the way again, Anne. So what do you think? Should we get going?
Definitely.
Brilliant, okay.
And none of this is edited at all. So, as James has said, please, whether coughing or losing my line of thought, excuse it. So, thinking about life itself, and quite often I do sit and think about life on this earth. It's difficult. How do I relax? What do I find to make my life more relaxing? For me, reading is relaxing. And I look around today and I see so many people who are not relaxed. They're not sat down. They may find it relaxing to be playing a game, to be talking to somebody else, to be looking something up on a phone. For me, that wouldn't be relaxing. I have to relax by reading a book because it takes me out of myself. But where is it taking me? Because I have read historical novels. So if I'm reading a book, this is a question I'm asking you, James, is if I am reading a book about other generations, or let's go, for example, for World War II, because I did live during World War II. So if I'm reading a book about that, I've also got the experience of it.
Yes.
So how influential can a book be? If you've lived through the time and you're reading about the times, sometimes there's conflict.
Yes, I feel I understand what you're saying.
So today, the question I'm asking you because of your generation. So your generation would automatically, if you had that thought, would Google it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I'm sure most people listening would probably have a similar response.
So, as I've said, what I get from reading is unbelievable because it involves my own imagination as well.
Yes. So are you talking predominantly fiction stories?
Oh yes, I only read fiction. I don't read for education.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that you did. Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
I've been in some form of education all my life. I certainly don't read. Education.
I know. I wasn't suggesting that you
do. For escapism.
Yeah, I understand.
So yes, I am talking about that.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that the questions I ask myself while I'm reading, and the memories I have, can you get that from just Googling?
My feeling initially, straight away, immediately, would be no. I feel there is something very powerful in my knowing between the author writing down the words. Now, the books that people read at home, the vast majority of them, pretty much nearly every single book is going to be printed. Even physical books are printed. So the author to the reader, there is a processing step in there. But it still feels more human-to-human contact. There isn't an interface between the absorption of the information. It's not going through another processing system. So with the internet and then with the searching for the information. Now you're talking about fiction, so maybe Kindle might be that platform that people read, or other platforms of reading ebooks are available as well. But the information is stored and processed, and then the journey of the information is taking a technological route.
So it's still written word though, isn't it, on Kindle?
It's not written down. It's still printed.
Written word.
We're looking at semantics here, so it's.
But Google is.
But you wouldn't Google a story.
No,
so these for me, unless I'm misunderstanding what you're.
No, you're quite right.
For me, if you're talking about fiction, that would be predominantly in the form of a story, which is contained within a book, either physical paperback, hardback book, or a form of technology. So reading off a Kindle or an iPad or something like that. Whereas to Google something quite often is trying to source information of, it's predominantly non-fiction based in most people's behaviour. Maybe people Google stories, but I would imagine so. Is that right? Have I understood what you're asking?
No, you're understanding you're understanding perfectly what I'm asking you. So if because of my life's, what I've done throughout my life, I'm reading fiction, as you say, as an escapism. And I admit it's an escapism. It also teaches me a lot. But in the past, when I was studying for nursing, I would have lots of books around me.
Yeah, but they would be non-fiction books.
Non-fiction books.
Right, okay.
But it was still lots of books.
Yes.
It wasn't...
So you're talking about the importance of books.
For me,
okay.
Or if you think there is an importance to them.
Okay, I got a little bit confused about fiction and non-fiction and Googling a story. Right, we're there. I think books are so important. If all of the internet went down, where would we source our information from?
My house, lots of books.
So we would have two resources, wouldn't we? Two obvious resources. There are other resources available.
Yes.
But there would be two obvious ones. One is ourselves, so our collective memory. So the information that we stored up inside of ourselves. I'm talking about the physical vessels here.
Yes.
So our collective memory and what we're able to retell and remember and put that down. And also what's stored within books and on paper and such like, and other forms, like I said. But everything that's digitalised, if that were to go, all of the information would go. Now, how likely that is and how that would happen, I'm not getting into that. And to be honest, that's difficult to quantify, and I don't have a means of quantifying it empirically this morning. But as a thought experiment, would it be possible to eradicate all of the information on the internet in one move?
Yes.
Now, yes, hypothetically,
yes.
In theory, yes. So if the electrical grid across the world went and it wiped itself, which is highly improbable, but not impossible, and could become more likely dependent upon certain factors, maybe for another time. Now, would it be possible to remove all of the information that's within humans in one fell swoop? Well, yes, it would, but it would be a catastrophic event, which would have to wipe out nearly all or but all of the human race in one move. So, I mean, a total global event or some sort of extinction event. Again, is that likely? Very unlikely. Is it possible to remove all books in one fell swoop? Now, that's not as easy to do. In fact, that's nigh on impossible, because all of the books are not stored in one place at one time. And again, it would take an extinction level of event to be able to wipe out. In fact, an extinction level event would wipe out all of it. My point is that our information in the long run is actually stored in a safer, more secure space within books, particularly more books, and particularly the diversity of books, and as in how books are put together and where the geography of these books are, that the information across time is better stored in books than it is on the internet and any digital format that owes its existence and underpinned by the internet. I'm not saying today there isn't a place for the internet. This information will be coming to you. Our conversation this morning, and people listening will be listening via the internet in one step
Yes.
removed or 2 steps removed, depending upon on
Yes.
how they've come across the information. But the internet itself has provided the platform for us to share this. So it's serving a purpose, at least today it is anyway.
So that, what you just said,
Yes.
it then leads me to my question about historical novels. So history itself
Yes.
is that I can then look and think, word of mouth, you talk about word of mouth. Word of mouth has always been, so there's always been word of mouth, hasn't there? But talking about books being destroyed, and they can't always be, in history, how many different religions have not been allowed to practice and have hidden their books, and they're still there and they still read them? Throughout history, there's many, isn't there?
Well,
Religions or other things that authorities have said,
yes.
you can't have the Bible here,
Yeah.
or you can't have the Quran here, or you can't have. But humans have always managed to hide some books.
Yes. Yes. I mean, this is an unknown for the masses, and we don't have access to that information. No. But yes, there are libraries that are containing information, books, that aren't accessible to the general populace. And you're right, certain countries have laws against certain types of books, and certain information is only accessible to certain people. And that regulation is also with the internet as well within certain countries. And we don't know, the interesting part of this is that none of us know to what extent the information that is actually available is readily available to us as individuals. But you're right, there is information and there are books out there, lots of them, which add to our history, that add to our story, and that might change how we perceive and feel about certain events in history, or they may confirm what we already know. They could be quite radical or they could be nonsensical, but there's a lot of information that is hidden. There's a lot of intelligence that's hidden. There's a lot that's hidden, but we all behave like that in our lives to some extent, don't we?
We do,
yes. We're all measured to some extent with how much we share with people around us, and some of that is very healthy, I would say, in terms of how open we are about our story with the people that we meet, how far we share that information and who we trust with that information. I'm not placing any value judgment on what's right or wrong in that situation. I'm just recognising that maybe that's part of our human nature, that an element of what's sacred is protected. It isn't always conspiracy in the sense of something malevolent, although I would suggest maybe there is an element of that as well. But sometimes something that's sacred is not readily available until maybe people are ready. Like you may have some stories to tell some people in your life, but they're not ready to hear it yet, or vice versa. So it isn't always as controlled as people think it is, but there are certain areas of information and there are certain stories of which there is a lot more information out there. And you're right, dependent upon to what level and to what end is that information coerced, mediated, suppressed, hidden, or even attempted to be removed from history. Burning of books is very famous at different points in history. It's punctuated many a regime, the burning of books and the eradication of story. But the powerful thing that's within books, the powerful thing that's within humans, is the power of idea. And an idea can never be destroyed. An idea can never be destroyed. The ideas that are within the imagination of the human being, the imagination of story itself, can never be destroyed. That's how powerful everybody is. That's how powerful humanity is. Ideas are so powerful. And the most powerful books with the most powerful stories, the most transformative, are full of ideas. They're not always good, they're not always bad, and it's subjective in terms of how we translate them into our life and what meaning we derive from them. But it's ideas. Ideas are the fuel of imagination, and they're the fuel of what will bring out the potential of humanity. So there may be a motive in the ideas in terms of how much people know, when they know, and to whom any information is shared with. It's the power of idea.
I think the word you used while you were talking then, more or less in the beginning of it,
Yes.
is trust.
Okay.
So trust, for me, is very, very important.
Yes.
When my dad came back from the war,
The Second World War.
the Second World War, yes.
Well, it would be very rude of me to suggest it was the First World War, wouldn't it?
unless you dug me up.
The Second World War, yeah.
When he came back from the Second World War,
yes,
most, in fact, pretty much all of the men that came back from that war didn't tell their stories.
Yes. Well, I've heard you say that.
And they didn't tell their stories, not because of the general public knowing about it. They were all very, very disturbed.
Yes.
We had men coming back from the Second World War that were disturbed.
Yes.
And, we have names for all these things now.
PTSD.
PTSD.
Yeah.
In those days, they didn't have any words because they didn't know what they went out to fight.
Yes.
My dad was given a rifle and a bayonet.
Yes.
And had no idea that he was going to use those.
I know.
So imagine the trauma.
I know. It's. I'm sure lots of people listening have got sons, particularly sons, but daughters as well. Sons who are 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, or grandsons that are of that age. And it's incomprehensible, really, to imagine that they are, within quite a quick period of time, to be honest. 1 minute they're a boy running around in shorts in the back garden playing football, or, having an ice cream, drinking lemonade. The next thing, they're sent off to war. I mean, that... We've forgotten somehow, haven't we? We've forgotten the enormity of it. We all see films and we read books and we hear about it. And every year in the United Kingdom, we mark the occasion. And least we forget, and rightly so. But we forget how innocent those boys were, and how innocent those families were, and the enormity of what transpired, and that must have had such... We must be still reeling from the impact of that today, to be honest with you. The collective consciousness of the earth, the collective psyche of humanity was touched so deeply by such a global event that we are still working through that now. We are. We are, and we forget that. We think that we've progressed, that we're postmodern, that the age of IT, now the age of AI, the technological revolution has begun, and that people think that this is progress, and people think that we are now where we always needed to be. And yet we're not. The world is still at war. The human race is still healing. The divisions are still present. And in some ways we've regressed, haven't we, Anne? I mean, you may not agree with me, but in some ways we've regressed. We may have technologically quantum leaps. I mean, real quantum leaps forward. Whether that's for the good of humanity is another question. From 1940, 1939, from 1900 maybe, if we include the First World War.
Yes,
but in terms of our manners, in terms of our respect, in terms of our decency, the way that we conduct ourselves, the way that we think about ourselves, the way that we treat each other, our hope, the level of goodness and conscience. I mean, it's debatable, and it certainly isn't true for every individual. There are so many good people out there. But I would say, as a whole, it would appear that those fundamentals of common decency, of the common good, have regressed since that time. It feels that way to me. You've lived through it, so what would you say?
I think, as I said in the beginning, just before, that trust. I lived with trust. I think this is what I don't understand today, and I really don't understand it.
Is this where you'd leave your front door open, leave your back door open?
That's right.
Your kids would play out and you wouldn't worry about them. The neighbours would look after your children. Is that what you're talking about?
That's what I'm talking about. So you trusted your neighbours, you trusted people with your children because
Yes.
you knew you could trust them.
Yes.
There always has been, and there always will be, an element of certain people who are not trustworthy.
Yes.
That's nature for some people.
There's an element of risk, always.
Yeah. So my mother would say to me, if I was going to the park to play with my friends at the park, don't go in the parkie's hut on your own.
The parkies, is that the park keeper?
Because we used to have a park keeper. Parks all had a park keeper.
And you called him a parkie?
The parkie, so he was the parkie.
The
So you don't go in the parkie's hut.
The parkie's hut, the park keeper's hut, right? Yes.
And in those days, no explanation.
Yes.
You never had explanations of why.
Okay.
But we didn't go in the parkie's hut because she said, don't go in the parkie's hut.
Okay.
So we knew by her tone,
Yes.
and all my friends by their parents, we knew by the tone you didn't do it. And you didn't do it. And that was something inside yourself that stopped you.
Yes.
So then she would say, if you are playing, don't play near the bushes.
Okay.
And none of us played near the bushes with no explanation.
And you followed the instructions?
And we followed the instructions. Lots of instructions we didn't follow, I can assure you.
But you intuitively felt that
we
that was to be followed?
We intuitively knew when they said something there was a reason, but we didn't have to know the reason.
Did you feel safe? Which is a bit paradoxical,
Always.
which is strange given the context. You were a child during the Second World War.
Always safe.
So in a way you weren't safe because there were literal, if I ever got this right, there were bombs going off, weren't there, where you lived?
I lived in Bradford, Manchester, Clayton Aniline, English Steel, of course.
So you lived in the centre of Manchester, which is at the heart of the industrial Britain, isn't it? Or one of the major hubs of industrial Britain, Manchester, which was bombed, like many UK cities, ferociously during the Battle of Britain, particularly. And you were growing up during that time.
Yes.
Did you ever see a bomb go off?
Oh, you don't see a bomb. You don't see.
I'm presuming you. I don't know. I apologise if I'm insensitive or rude or
No,
I don't know. I suppose I'm
the
asking.
only things that you don't
questions.
actually see when they drop the bombs on when they're going over to Clayton Aniline or something like that.
So what's Clayton Aniline?
That's a company that made weapons.
Okay, so factory.
So for any factories where they were making the weapons, or where English Steel, where they made the steel for them.
So they repurposed the factories.
Yes,
for industrial war.
They did. Yes. So of course the women had to work in them.
Okay.
So my auntie worked in Johnson's Wireworks, where she worked on a crane.
It was interesting, wasn't it, if I've understood this correctly, that before the war, most women in society didn't work. At least this is what the rough story.
They would do cleaning and take in washing.
Yes.
But they didn't go out to work.
So the roles in society started to shift because the majority of men, and particularly young men, went off to war.
Yes.
And often, unfortunately, didn't return. So women went out to work.
They didn't have a choice.
No, I'm not saying it's wrong at all.
No, but I'm pointing out that women had to go out to work
to keep the country going.
And it's not really recognised how those women kept this country going.
Wow.
And that's with no food. Food rations.
And the children as well, because not everybody's children were able to be evacuated. No. And you yourself and your brother weren't evacuated, were you?
By choice.
Your mother kept you?
Yes, by choice.
Wow.
She could have sent us away, but we didn't. She said by choice she didn't want to.
Yeah.
We didn't know that. We didn't know she'd made
Did you know
choice.
this? I apologise if this is so obvious that it seems silly to ask, but did you know there was a war going on? If you were born into it and you grew up in it, did you know?
No.
Did somebody say to you that there is a war going on?
No.
Or did you just think that was life?
No, remember there's no television.
I know, but in terms of your mother, your auntie, your grandmother?
No, never.
So as far as you knew,
did
your mother explain to you where your father was? Or was it just that...
No, my grandma, who was my dad's mother...
Because your father was away at war, wasn't he?
He was away at war.
Yes.
All the families where... Because I'm from a very poor area, Bradford, Manchester.
Yes.
Families all lived in the same street.
Yes.
So you didn't just have... You'd have your cousins, your aunties, brothers, sisters, all living in the same street.
Yes.
In 2 up and 2 downs.
Yes.
So yes, you never got frightened, but nobody talked about it. So if there was a bomb, you were warned when the sirens went off, which still frightened me.
Yes.
Then everybody would go to a shelter.
Yes. I'm saying yes as in I've seen it on television and film.
So you've seen it on television. Yeah. So you would all go to a shelter. But there was also what they called Anderson shelters, which were in your backyard.
Okay.
So that was like a tin thing that, it was probably metal, it looked like tin to me.
Yeah.
And you used to all crawl into that.
Yeah.
And you'd be just all sat up against each other.
And you can remember that?
And I can remember the noise. It's the noise.
How long would you spend in the shelter?
Until
hours?
The siren went off again. It can be hours. It could be all night.
Wow.
And you still got up and went to school the next day. You didn't stop you going to school.
Yeah. Wow.
So noise.
We don't know we're born, do we?
No. No, we don't. No, you don't know you're born. So you can imagine that those men
Yes.
who were fighting were also worried about their families here.
I know. Well, I don't know. I'm doing my best to imagine.
So this technology we're using now,
yes,
which is wonderful, it is wonderful. This would have been like a Morse code tapping like this if you were sending a message. They used to use Morse code.
They did. Yes, they did.
So they didn't have any of this technology at all.
I mean, one of the things that always, it's mesmerising to think about, and it's often said, but just because it's said a lot shouldn't take away the just sheer astonishment of it. There's more computing power in the mobile smartphone, one of the modern ones now,
yes,
than there was in the Apollo mission that went to the moon. So the spacecraft, the spaceship that went to the moon had less computing power than one of the modern cutting-edge smartphones that most people have in one guise or another, in their back pocket or in their handbag. And that is astonishing. I find that absolutely astonishing that level of exponential development has happened in such a short space of time. And that, I suppose, in a way is concerning in terms of, you think that was 70, 75 years from the wartime that you're speaking about. Maybe a bit longer, to be honest, but we're not that many decades ahead, are we? And from that time, and where are we going to be in the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years at the rate of progression as things currently stand, and the direction of travel that civilization is seemingly going down, and the priorities that it's making. Maybe rather than looking at a question or an answer there, just a point of reflection and thinking, well, if things can accelerate so quickly, and with each step, technologically particularly, with each step, it accelerates the next step. So the exponential growth, the exponential movement forward, where is it heading and to what end?